This is Ray Shackleford.
And I'm Eddie Young Obote.
And welcome to
Fresh Perspective.
This is our show where we discuss politics, the civic space community, all in an effort to bring us together across the diaspora. And today, this is part 2 of our State of Black America. On our last episode, we talked about the Urban League, gave all of you a background on what the organization is about, what they do here in the city, including some of their volunteer organizations. We didn't really get to focus a lot on the report. And so today, Dee and I wanted to dive more into the actual State of Black America report, looking at some of the areas that it focuses on within that index when you're looking at the tech space, jobs, black-owned businesses, civic engagement, as well as social justice.
Yeah, so one thing that popped out for me in that report is just the digital inequality, right, in the tech space. And we talked about that a little bit last episode in regards to the State of Black America 2018. And what I read in that report is that black women are kind of taking the lead effort in trying to not only diversify the tech space, but also to bring about that equality in the tech space. Because people, most times we often know that, like, when you say tech, we're talking about white males, all generations, young, old. Those are who the people that control that tech space. You have your Mark Zuckerbergs, you have, all your different people that represent that now. But you see women of color who are entering those tech spaces by force. It's kind of like, here I am. You have somebody from Airbnb who just recently became, I believe, some kind of dealing with cultural diversity with Airbnb. You see somebody from FCC that's doing different things. So I like the fact that even in our State of Black America, and we're talking about the digital space now, like, you get a chance to highlight women of color. You see hashtag Black Lives Matter started from 3 black women. And that's still a current movement now. When you say that, you're like, it's not just a movement, it's a statement, it's a way of living, it's a sum of our lives. And that started from black women, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, for me, I love that. I'm like, hey, they represent me. I'm representing.
Absolutely. And they're definitely leading the charge. And I think one of the challenges is that when they looked at the numbers across, let's say, the big 3, when they're looking at Facebook, Google, those entities have less than 1.5% of their workforce that are African American. Wow. And so that's very stark difference, or as basically like a chasm, if you will,
right.
When it comes to representation within that space. Because when you think about things like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Google, we're one of the top users in that space. However, we're not also benefiting from being a part of those organizations,
right,
or finding ways to profit from them.
Right.
And so there's been a push by the Urban League to try and address that within those companies, partnering with them, making sure that they're aware of those issues. And there's actually a story that was told during the taping of a young lady that's created an app because she too was somebody who checked all the boxes, went to the Ivy League schools,
right,
super talented, very intelligent young lady, and she wasn't able to break through to get into the tech space. And part of that is some of the implicit biases that go into the hiring process. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately what she did was created an app that helps to take away those biases through the hiring process. And it's been thriving, it's been growing. A lot of companies are starting to utilize it. Okay. She's trying to continue to push that into the industry to make more headway as it relates to getting African Americans in that space. So even though it is definitely a challenge right now, there is, I guess, a hope or a silver lining.
Okay.
There is a very small amount of progress, but it's going to be a focus moving forward, just because, again, we use so much technology within our community. And so it just makes sense that we should also be able to benefit from what those companies are doing and how they're doing business and making money in our community.
Right. I mean, I like what you said when you highlighted that a lot of our African American communities are users of the social media. I'm quite sure a lot of y'all have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Pinterest, all these different social media tools that we use just to communicate our daily lives, right? Or even for business aspects, right? And you don't see a lot of us in the boardroom making those decisions about a demographic that truly uses your tools on an everyday basis. And I think last episode we referenced that a lot of times companies or the tech space don't provide opportunities for minorities to be involved in that process, and we're now recently seeing that, like we mentioned before, Black Girls Code and Afrotech and all these different, small startup tech companies that are, kind of being birthed out of Silicon Valley or even right in Texas and Austin. We're getting to see that small merging of inclusivity and diversity as we kind of push forward. One thing I will say is that, shout out to the Houston Area Urban League Young Professionals. About maybe a year or two ago,
2 years ago, I think.
2 years ago, some of our Urban League members decided that, hey, we wanted to tackle juvenile justice, right? And how do you do that? Well, they wanted to do it from a tech space, from a digital space. And this was before this year's report even came out, focusing on digital, inclusive things like that. So I will say, I think for Houston at least, we're on the forefront of trying to be a part of that change, right? Trying to address, whether it's social justice, whether it's economics, whether it's small businesses in the tech space. I really want to say kudos to the Hall YP organizations.
No, and absolutely. Our Urban League here, like you said, the past 2 years has made that a focus, especially trying to push young people in that direction,
right.
Giving them vehicles and opportunities to thrive in that space, because we are much more aware of the fact that we're not going in the direction that is where we are right now.
Right.
There was even some crazy statistic they were putting out about, like, LeBron James, the last time he wasn't in the NBA Finals, there was no Instagram or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so this is you going back like 8-9 years. You got to remember he's been in the finals 9 straight years.
Almost all his life. Right?
Exactly. So when you think about it, it's very different. The world we operate in now, technology drives a lot of things. We've seen the impact of that within the city of Houston as a whole, because we were just trying to bid for Amazon to come to the city.
Right.
And we lost out on that because they didn't view us as being as advanced as we need to be.
Right.
When you look at Amazon, when you think tech, that's at the core of that. So that's one of those big free companies. And so as a result, in us losing out on that bid, the mayor, our city council have started to make changes and initiatives that we're doing. So even there's this huge Sears outlet that just closed over on Main.
Yeah.
And so
I remember we used to shop over there and get our school uniforms.
And so now it's being rededicated as a tech facility. And so
I heard about that.
The push is very much alive, not just within our community, but I think within our city here in Houston as a whole. And so I'm excited about some of those changes. We just have to make sure that we continue to focus on that. And it's not just making sure our kids are educated in that, because one of the things in the report that stood out to me was we actually have a higher percentage of people that are getting degrees for computer science, but we still have such a small percentage of the jobs. And so clearly that there's something that's not lining up.
So what do you think might be like that cause of that not lining up? Because we always promote, hey, you can do coding, you can do computer science, computer engineering, whatever it is. But then when you get out and you graduate after you've committed 4 years or how many years to this education, you get out into that space saying, hey, I want to apply for these jobs. They're not available. What do you think might be the cause of that?
Right, and I don't think they're not available. They're not necessarily always available to us.
Okay.
And I think it goes back to some of the things we touched on earlier as it relates to implicit bias in the hiring process.
Gotcha.
Where are these companies recruiting? Do you see Facebook in TSU? Do you see Google at Morehouse? And it's not just these one-off where they may come on the campus and do some initiative, but are they doing targeted recruiting and spending time on our campuses, getting to know our students and making a concerted effort to do programs and initiatives that make sure that you're pulling people from that space, from that community, to put in your company and ultimately put them in a position to be decision makers and help to develop that pipeline of African Americans coming into that company. And so I think that's why the Urban League is putting it at the forefront.
Right.
President Morial has made it a big focus because he understands the importance of it, and if we don't put it out there on the table, so to speak, it won't be addressed. And so hopefully we'll see more targeted initiatives that focus directly on that and get us moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, I also think it's also, like you touched on, creating not only those opportunities but relationship, right? So you, like, one thing you mentioned was having a relationship more so with a tech company and that school, right? So for my alma mater, that may be Texas Southern University teams up with Microsoft, or that may be Prairie View A&M teams up with Google, and creating those initiatives. And I think that this report really not only brings awareness, but then also can bring about a form of change, right? It says, hey, this is where we're at. This is where we want to go. What can we do to meet that in the middle? And kind of starting where you said, small stuff. Like I said before, Urban Code was just an idea. Partnered up with Microsoft and Texas Southern University. And you have students, high schoolers, you have college students who are involved with that coding process, kind of started that relationship. So hopefully that may be one of the solutions to, you know, kind of solving that gap.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things as well that came out of that discussion, and even like I mentioned, the young lady that has the app that's created that helps address implicit bias is Black-owned businesses. So one of the other big focus areas was the fact that Black businesses grew from approximately 1.9 million to 2.7 million.
Wow.
However, the revenues were almost cut in half. So they went from maybe 110,000 almost like 54,000.
Wow.
And so when we hear those numbers, it's like, on the one hand, okay, Black businesses grew tremendously. You're talking about almost 1 million in growth. However, the revenues were cut in half. So why is it? This is because you have all these people that are leaving corporate America, starting their own businesses, and they only have one employee. So now you're replacing your corporate income with your own business, but you're not expanding, you're not growing, you're not building capacity. And so one of the things that I don't think they got to dive into enough was the really root cause of that, and how do we address it, how do we move forward and get better. And something that kind of came in the off-camera conversations was potentially some of the ego that is involved with individuals wanting to have their own business, wanting to be their own CEO, and how do we have strategic conversations about partnerships to ultimately put us in a better place to have not only more businesses, but more businesses that are able to hire more than just one employee. Because at the end of the day, Black businesses are still the #1 employer of Black people. And so for us to really get to where we need to as a community from an economic standpoint, we're going to have to build up capacity. Because if we're the ones that are hiring us, then clearly we need our businesses to do well.
Right.
And so I definitely feel like we need to flesh out potentially some solutions for that. And we'll discuss that more as soon as we get back from this break.
And we're back. My name is Eddie Young Obos, and I'm with my co-host Ray Shackelford. And earlier we were talking about State of Black America 2018. Now we're going to touch into like solutions in regards to that gap in small businesses and why they're not thriving as they should be. Sorry.
Yes, and so I want to say that one of the things the Urban League here in Houston has done a very good job of doing is building up their Economic Development Center.
Yeah.
And so they have the Small Business University program where they focus, it's at least a 12-week program, and it's at no cost to the community. We don't want to say free because there is a cost, but it is something that's covered by sponsors. And so what they do is they take you from start to finish, looking at, how do you create a business plan, what's your idea, how do you do the financials, what's the break-even analysis for your business. So this is the cost, but at what point do you actually start making money? How do you market your business? How do you pitch it to potential investors? So they take people through this entire process, and they actually recently got an award for the work that they've been doing in that department. And so it's grown to be one of the best economic development centers in the country through the Urban League. And so they've done a very good job of working with those individuals that need that help, that find access to the program. But one of the biggest issues we find in our community as a whole is just access to resources.
Okay.
So people, like this program we're talking about now, how many people knew about it before we said something?
Right.
And one of the challenges consistently is getting the resources into the hands of everyday people. And so because it's not necessarily, the sexiest topic, it's hard to really just promote it and get it out there. Because even when we put it on social media, the type of people that are going to gravitate towards it more often than not is someone like myself or you.
Right.
So even there's a new fund, real estate fund, and one of my friends sent it to me yesterday. It's the Tulsa, Oklahoma real estate fund. So they're trying to recreate Black Wall Street. So for those that don't know, I think this was 97 years ago. It just happened on May the 31st. That was the anniversary. 97 years. The race riots ultimately led to the destruction of Black Wall Street.
Yeah.
That was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and allegedly it was started because a black man was accused of whistling or making a pass, or potentially some type of sexual act with a white woman. And so this led to these race riots that destroyed Black Wall Street, which was an area that was completely black-owned businesses.
Black-owned businesses,
lawyers, dentists,
schools,
doctors, blacksmith, any and everything you can think of was completely black-owned businesses, and it was completely destroyed. So what they're trying to do is raise, I want to say, around $50 million to go in, purchase land, and begin to recreate some of those same things, focusing on real estate.
Right.
And I think the IPO was supposed to go out soon. They raised, I want to say, like $7 million in 24 hours. So they've really been doing well. It's something I plan to research further. But again, that just goes to resources, like finding out about these things. That was something that, I saw on social media. I think even World Star put it out there, which is not the best medium for anything, but we're not going to focus on that.
Right.
But it's, how do you reach the masses? How do you get it into the hands of the community and make it palatable, if you will?
Right. So, for those who maybe they already have a small business, right? And like you said earlier, the first segment, that off camera, it was kind of like you guys were addressing the ego, right? So you may have a small business, maybe you sell clothes, or you sell shoes, or you sell tech, whatever, and you've been selling this stuff for maybe 5 years, and you're doing well. Or maybe you've been selling it for 30 years, and you've been doing pretty decent. How do we get those kind of people involved in a program like Hall? Say, hey, here are more resources to kind of move your small business to another level, where you're, actually kind of seeing more in income, seeing more in production, seeing more in hiring employees of, minorities. Like, how do we get those kind of people? Because, like you said, most people that are going to enter that kind of program is people like my age, your age, young professionals, even some who might be a little bit older, who see right now the benefit to sacrifice 12 weeks to make sure that they get the tools and the resources for their small business. But what if you have those who are been in business for a while and they're like, I don't need that. I've been doing this all my life. I know what works. It's kind of like, okay, how do we move you to that next step?
Right, and I think there's layers to it. A lot of it has to do with the mindset. So the first component is the ego piece. We have to get out of the mindset within our community of always having to have our own. And this, I think, goes back to another episode when we were kind of talking about cultural differences within the African community versus African American community. Because it's like, okay, in African American community, when you turn 18, it's like, okay, you need to get out there and get it.
Right.
And I feel like that translates also into our black-owned businesses.
Our businesses. Okay.
Because within the African community, you were telling me that's not how it is. Once you turn 18, it's not like you got to get out.
Right.
There's more support there to help you make sure that you're established and that you're put in a position to be successful.
Okay.
And so I think if we can get away from having to be at the forefront every time and be a CEO and being okay with dividing up the pie, like, so if you're good at consulting, you have this business, you're doing well, but you're starting to get approached by a lot of people about project management. That's not your expertise, but you know somebody who has a project management business. Look at potentially partnering with that individual. You both have a specific skill set that you thrive in. Like you said, maybe 5 years, 30 years, whatever it is, but you've been doing well. How do I grow this? How do I get access to a different type of clientele? There's opportunity there once you come together, if you do it the right way, where you both can, cross-pollinate, if you will, clients.
Right.
And make that exchange.
I like a barter kind of service, right?
Right. And bring that together in one shop and be able to address multiple needs for clients, but you're not making sure that you know everything. You have a partner that specializes in that. I do this. I've seen some people do it very well with real estate. They start off with just brokers or agents, I should say. Then they grow into brokers. Then they bring in a lending component. Then they may have, so it gets to a point where you're doing everything under one house or under one shop, but you may not be over all of it. You have business partners that you work with that handle those different components. And I think if we're more strategic and take more inventory consistently of what we're doing within our businesses every, 2 to 3 years, because the way the market is, it's changing every day. And it's really, you probably should take inventory every 6 months, if not sooner than that, constantly looking at how can I improve, or building on what I'm doing successfully, what can I do better, how can I grow this, and I feel like we'll be in a better position. You also have some individuals who just don't want to grow their businesses.
Right.
They're happy where they are, and that's fine. And that's not the people we're talking to, but for the individuals that want to grow it, get to a different place, I think those are some of the ways we start, but also changing the mindset of having to rely so much on corporate America. And David Banner had like a very long video on this. I think it was an interview he did.
I think I saw that.
And he even had some issues with some of our own universities in terms of only training us for corporate America and not focusing more on training us to be black-owned business owners. So even like with my godson, because he's about to be 11 years old, he likes video games. He said he wants to start his own business. So like whenever I see him and whenever we talk, I'm asking him, what have you done to move this forward? Like, what is the plan? What are you selling? What's your price points? How did you come up with it?
At 11, y'all.
Because but you gotta start having those conversations
at a young age,
and getting them to think differently, because otherwise they'll continue to be in that same mindset, because my parents weren't having those conversations. And my father has owned his own business for 30 plus years. But again, that generation was taught to push us in a different way. And so we have to change that mindset in order to get back to Black Wall Street and build up that wealth within our communities again.
We even here in Houston that we kind of have like little pockets of Black Wall Street, right? Not, it's unofficial, but you know, you see the strip on Alameda, right? You go down the Third Ward area, you'll see all manners of black-owned businesses, restaurants, clothing places, car washes. I mean, they're on that strip. You can come down,
Insurance.
right? You come down to the southwest side, down Bissonnette, and it's kind of like people know that as a African, strip. You can go there and get a tailor, get some good Nigerian or whatever kind of African food you're looking for. I mean, you got lawyers, you have doctors, pharmacies. I mean, they're there, and so these little pockets exist here in Houston, as we're talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and them doing it here. It'll be really nice to see an official thing done here in Houston, especially since we're like one of the most diverse cities in the United States anyway. So it'll be really cool to kind of like make that an official thing here in Houston. But I kind of want to switch gears in regards to the state of Black America. And in that report, I noticed two things. I noticed that the civic engagement and the social justice numbers they actually declined compared to the past State of Black America 2018. And I'm kind of curious to kind of pick your brain, like why do you think that might have, kind of start with the civic engagement component first?
So I think with the civic engagement, it's going to always vary depending on what election cycle we're in. So presidential years versus non-presidential years. And we had this conversation with Tanisha from the county clerk's office. People typically are more engaged just when there's a president's race,
right?
Just because that's the top office in the land. People view it in a certain light, and whether they understand it or not, they just feel like that's very important. So they're more engaged. You got the national debates, the television coverage. Everything is just geared toward it. And so because there's so much money behind those types of races, it's typically able to engage more people versus local races. You're not going to have that type of money involved in those races. So
right.
There's not the machine behind it to get people out or to engage them. But also, if you look at our most recent President Barack Obama, I feel like he brought out, I feel like we know the numbers bear out, he brought out people in record numbers.
Right.
That was something that we had never seen before. And so when you have someone that was able to connect with so many different people, especially within our community, because that was our first Black president, he gave so many people hope. That was part of his campaign.
Yeah.
And now you shift gears, he's out of office, and we have 45, and I feel like people are discouraged. When you compound that along with what's been shown in the media as it relates to police shooting down people of color, Black men, in instances where they've done nothing wrong. And people ask me, when I've been out there trying to register people to vote, or when I was campaigning, why should I vote?
Right.
Why does it matter? Because when it gets down to, brass tacks, if you will, when you're looking at people in their everyday lives that are just trying to, pay their bills, keep their lights on, you're telling them they need to go vote. That doesn't necessarily always connect. And we touched on this with Tanisha
right,
as well.
Tanisha.
And until we get very effective at doing messaging and making sure that our audience and our voters or potential voters understand why it matters, in terms of, let's say you live in a city council district and one side of the district looks real nice, the other one doesn't. Who do you go to? Your city council. So that's why that matters. If you feel like your area is not developed the same way that the other side of the district is,
right.
That's the person you need to go talk to, that you hold accountable. And so us doing a better job within our legacy organizations, whether it's the Urban League, NAACP, or just one of us coming up with a program or an initiative to educate people on why it's important and really work with them in those communities versus trying to talk at them or tell them what they need to do. And the old, our ancestors, that doesn't connect with people.
Right.
Whether or not obviously it's true, but as we get younger and younger generations and we're further removed from that, it's harder to get that to resonate. And so those are just, I feel like, some of the issues, and it's a lot.
That's a lot. I mean, it's a lot to try to kind of put together why there was a decline on civic engagement, and I totally agree with that. And also, kind of touching on the social justice aspect too, I think that desensitization is like a big thing in regards to that decline, right? When you see more of our black and brown brothers and sisters that are gunned down in the streets or handcuffed for no reason. You have the Waffle House incident, you have the university incident, you have Starbucks. I mean, there are incidences that are just reoccurring now that are becoming normal in a sense, right?
Right.
And so people are kind of, I think, become either detached from it, they don't want to look at it, they just don't want to continue to see this kind of injustice happening on a daily, plastered on the news, as if this is a normal thing, right? And you get people who are less involved compared to when hashtag Black Lives Matter started compared to now. You see that decline. When you say, hey, unfortunately, you may, know somebody or see on social media whose person is a hashtag, right? They were gunned down or they were shot or, whatever injustice happens. And now it's kind of like you just reshare and you go. There isn't a reshare, what can we do, what forms can we have, how can I be engaged more, outside of social media, what else can I do? People are not really doing that anymore. Just more of a reshare and move on. You may not even have that conversation. Just kind of like, did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. Okay.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of what happens is something happens, we react, there's a protest, there's hashtags, and then there's nothing else. And so it keeps happening, and so it's become the norm, and people expect it. It's like, okay, this happened, they're going to protest, they're going to be mad, we'll put it on the news, it'll go away, we go back to life. And so one of the things that I feel was very effective at this most recent legislative policy conference where they did the State of Black America is they actually gave us an opportunity to text and email our senators around a specific issue. And it was very easy. Like, you went in, it took like 30 seconds, put in your information, and it showed you a message, you sent it to them. I got a response from at least one of my senators here in the state of Texas, Senator Cornyn. I didn't get one from Senator Cruz, but it sent it to both of them. And so that, I think, is at least a step in the right direction. No, that's not the end-all, be-all, but developing mechanisms where we're able to quickly get some type of action and connect with our representation.
Yeah, voice heard.
I think is how we need to move, and ultimately where we'll be able to get us moving in the right direction, I should say. It's interesting we're closing this out with the social justice component because coming up in our next episode, we'll be talking about race and justice.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we've run out of time with this conversation. And so my name is Ray Shackleford.
And I'm Edie Young Obote.
And this has been
Fresh Perspective.